1962, but that was the barn, but I saw other camps and all over.
So how many students have you taught over the years?
They're trying to, New Jersey Television was trying to do a research on that, and they think 10,000 or more, because they're all over the place.
So when I got to my studio, that phrase was so important to finishing this, because as I draw, I want to make every part of my drawing and painting, well in this case drawing, important. I had a teacher years ago, I went on a residency and I did this crazy reclining figure painting in this residency. It was a day that we had to have a model. And I had a crit, and the teacher said to, and I put this red thing in there, and the critic said to me, "What does that mean?" Now, I don't know, it just looked good. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever said it just looked good to me? And this critic, she was really tough, and she said, "It doesn't mean anything." I thought, oh, okay. So that plagues me. It was one of those things that critics said, and I have to tell you, students, there's probably, I think you'll probably have a very small group of bits of information, maybe 5, not even 10 bits of information that can carry you through your career. And that's one of them. That teacher resonates to me and says, "What does that mean?" So I'm looking at every bit of this drawing and what does it mean? So Pat always wears these long, like he wore a long black tunic the day I saw you. She always has these scarves on. I said, "Well, what does this mean? Like, what did that black tunic mean?" And then when at the third visit, when she said, "Candace told me," that was like wisdom. I said, "She has to be enrobed in turkey feathers." Now, I don't know, I had a turkey feather in the still life room, and I thought we were done with still life because the last day of class, I thought, well, we're just going to do a critique, so I took the turkey feather back because I needed it. And my student came in the last day to do her finish her painting, Dad. It's like, "Where's my turkey feather?" I took the turkey feather, I'm sorry. So that one turkey feather is all over here. Thank Candace for helping me get through.
You're wrong. I already thought that as soon as I saw it. I was like, must have been the same amount of time when this talk was going on, because the turkey feather was very prominent.
And Pat has turkeys at her farm, at her barn. She's got a tom and lots of babies. Right? So I think that there's the connection there. I should let you ask questions. I mean, I could go on and on about each one of these, but should I keep going? You know, talking about this one here, you can stay where you are. Stay where you are, Pat. You're fine.
That sounds like a line in a movie.
This one was, I think actually this was my second one. And I went out sailing with Rob Resch. You know he's a sailor? Do you want to open a door?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We turned the air on, so it's...
Turn the air on?
We turned it on.
Yeah, you could probably open that back door. I'm thinking like people are going to die.
It's open.
Sooner or later.
They don't want you to stay that long. So I went sailing. How many of you gone sailing? Once. I mean on a sailboat, not an ocean liner. I have never been on anything so active. I've never been on or involved with anything that's so active and moving. And Rob loves it. I guess, of course, all sailors love it. I'm sitting there. The boat is small. I shouldn't say that because every sailor wants the big one, right? The biggest boat. So I don't know anything about sizes and boats. But anyway, you can reach and touch the water. So he's got his hand, he's working on the sails, he's working on the tiller, which is steering the boat with the rudder, and he's looking at, what's the thing that tells the depth? Anybody know? Anyway.
A depth meter.
There we go, a depth meter. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Okay. So he's looking at that. He's looking around. He's doing this. He's looking at the sails, checking the wind. And then the sail has to move, so you gotta get out of the way of the sail. I thought I'd rather be driving fast down the highway than sailing a boat. It's gotta be the most, there's a lot of responsibility. Because you run aground, you told me about a mishap he had when he did run aground. They have actually, like, tow vessels, right? Like you get a tow truck, they have ships that come out and tow you. So my theme is water, and all of a sudden I said, I'm in trouble. I'm on a sailboat. And it's about the sails. And I said, well, it's the water and the sails. So I started to talk to Rob about that. He said, well, that's what my work's all about. He said, it's about that dichotomy. It's about that duality of the sails and the wind and the water, too. He said, how am I going to, so I get to the studio, how am I going to separate this? How am I going to influence or amplify the idea of water and just minimize the idea of wind? So I did this drawing, and obviously I couldn't draw on the boat. There's no way that you can sit and draw. It's really, I mean, it's hard, really, really, on a small boat. So I did use photo reference, honest, full disclosure here. And but then I get the drawing on the easel. I said, well, how interesting is that? It's kind of boring, right? I went to bed, slept on it, tortured over it. Woke up, I said, turn it over, stupid. So I said, turn it over. And now it opened up possibilities. Because I now can draw the hands on the tiller in another direction. I now can do all the action of the tiller, which is constantly doing this. You know, this whole idea of moving that tiller, because the tiller is connected to the rudder, which steers the boat, right? And you're dealing with the force of the water. That's why it's called tilling the force. And before I even got to this point, I said, how am I going to involve a rudder? I didn't look at the rudder. I'm in the boat. I can't see the rudder. So I'm imagining what it looks like. I thought, I'm kicking myself. I said, I should have gone into the shipyard, because this was October, and they were already pulling ships out of the water to put them up for the winter. So it's hard to find all this stuff. There's so many variations online. And I said, but anyway, I did the tiller, and I said, there's the rudder. All of a sudden, I was able to connect the arm with the tiller, and he's steering the boat. Metaphorically, he is the rudder. And then when I did all the lines, and you know how you know when you got action, I got sails. So all of a sudden, the shape of the rudder, the tiller, repeatedly created all these sail shapes. And, you know, I just wanted to have that sense of movement. So this is another one where that movement had to be implied through the action of drawing, like that force of moving, that chalk across the page, and erasing, and actually have tears. In this one, there's a tear in this one, and it's the kind of thing where you keep pulling it and pulling it, and you have to kind of control where to stop it. I thought, oh, we're going too far, that's another story. So it really was very interesting in the sense that, as I said earlier, the paper actually had a force of its own and worked a little bit against me, which I liked, just like water can. So I love that idea of like fighting it. So through this, I had my subjects. I had my subject here, Brian. You know Brian. Here's a sailor. He's a seaman. So he said, and he was the one that reminded me, it was one of those duh moments. He said, well, you never touched the water. I said, yeah, you're not. He said, I never had an association with the water, because it's like a little city on the ship. And unlike my sailor here, it's an intimate relationship with the water. The seaman is in the water and vast oceans, and you're working with that as an element, but you're really not intimate in the sense that you can touch it or feel it, but it affects you. I said to him, so Brian sat for me. I drew him with his head and his arm. That's what I had. So what am I going to do with this? So I let him talk. And I said, what's it like on the ocean? And he said, it's like a dark wall at night. I said, what's it like on the ocean at night? He said, it's like a dark wall. I said, oh my gosh, what a beautiful metaphor. So I right away knew I needed a moon, and I needed more black and dark. And then I thought, well, I did this drawing, which I was really kind of fond of. And the first thing, going back, I said to Brian, I want you to sit for me. Will you agree to do this? And he said, yes. I said, come with something that is which references the naval career. Something, an object you had. So I came in with his hat, his cap. And I looked at the cap, and initially I thought, ooh, okay, what am I going to do with that? All right. I didn't say that to him. And I didn't say, I just had to work with it. So I let him talk about his career, and that he parted from his career and started a new one. You know, he came to school, he graduated from the academy, did his art career, and now he's on his administrative management career. So I said, well, I want the cap to be let go in the present. So he let the Navy go. In his past, he's picking up the hat. So that's when he started the career, to pick up the hat, the career. Why Puller? That's the ship he was assigned to. So I'm thinking all the time I'm drawing this, people are going to say, why is that there? Right?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Marine, but we're both ex-Marines.
And I've been on ships and sailboats.
Yep. So I said, well, we're going to play this out. The drawing will tell me what to do. It will develop. And I didn't even have the second figure, but I had a hat, an idea for the hat, and moving on with this. Brian's second hand was like this. And I had already done a sketch of that, and it was in suspense, but I didn't draw it. I knew, I didn't quite know where I was going with it. And he talked to me about, I said, what's FFG? Ooh, frigate.
Mm-hmm.
FFG, do you remember FFG?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's a frigate it was assigned to. Brian grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania. And if anybody knows about Erie, you'll soon discover there was the Battle of Lake Erie. There's a painting at the Academy of the Battle of Lake Erie. I don't know if it's still hanging. It was in the rotunda when I was drawing this. So I would go look at that painting. And Oliver Hazard Perry was the naval officer at that time. This was during the American Revolution. He had 3 ships. And he was up against the British Navy. Now, we all know the history of the British Navy, right? So they're in Lake Erie, thousands of sailors, many more ships. And Oliver Perry Hazard outsteered, outmaneuvered the whole British Navy that was in that lake at that time. His ship was blown up. He went from one ship to another, and he won the battle, captured every British ship, brought them all in to Presque Isle. His ship, 2 of the ships were sunk into the lake, and they pulled one out recently. Well, not recently. They did pull one out because the water preserves it, and they rebuilt it, so it's sitting there now in Lake Erie. So you can still see one of his original ships, and I can't remember all the names. And Niagara was one of them. But the frigate he was on was of, now the Navy classifies their ships, right? Their classifications of different ships. His frigate was the Oliver Perry Hazard class. He said of all the ships in the Navy he could have been assigned to, he was assigned to the USS Puller, which was an Oliver Hazard Perry class ship. So there was the connection between the past and the present for him. And it started to make me think about what he had said about the dark wall. And I thought of careers, and I thought of how we all have to negotiate, letting go of one thing, picking up another. And it's kind of like navigation, right? So I came up with this idea of navigation. So I studied, read, saw YouTubes, buku YouTubes on navigation, because I said, well, what did they navigate with? They had the sextant, they had dead reckoning, they used the log line, and leave that door. Can we leave that open? So,
It's too noisy.
huh?
Too noisy.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay, I got your thing. So I went online, and there's one guy, fabulous YouTube, that allows you, he photographed through the lens of the sextant. So you can actually see how it operates online, rather than having this abstract notion. I saw that YouTube probably 10 or 15 times. Every time I looked at it, I listened to him. Because I knew that I wanted some kind of reference to the sextant. I already had the arm. By then I had this drawn, and that swings. And what is the sextant? It's 60 degrees, right? So it has to be 60 degrees. So I took a template and measured 60 degrees for this. But I had this moon, and I had the dark sky, and this was developing as a dark. And this guy in this YouTube video said, and he's using the sun. And I knew that you could use the moon as well. Most people use the sun when they look for their orientation. But he said, you can use the moon. And he said, but he's talking about the sun. He said, you have to line the sun up on the horizon. And when you move the caliper or whatever with the sextant, you can see the image of the sun moving to the horizon. It's just the magic of mirrors and all that. Maybe some of you know more than I do about that. And this guy was so important on this video. He said, you can line the moon up with the bottom of the horizon, under the horizon. So, there we go. Because I said I couldn't get the sextant imagery to work without putting another moon. And I put another moon, and it turned out to be like a reflection of this one, but it allowed me to just pull the shapes of the triangular shapes out of that point. And all of the lines have to do with how you calculate and plot your on paper, your point in the ocean. And when I said, okay, I have to have an arc. I have to have an arc to plot the place on the Earth, because it's really, you have to plot around like the circle. We're all sitting on some kind of point on latitude and longitude, okay? And when I did the arc, it wasn't as mathematically calculating on my part, because I took a string and I put the easel bar at a point where I could hold the string, and I put a pencil, wrapped it around the string, and I made my arc. And I was roughly dealing with the aesthetic, but I didn't know where I needed that point to be crossing. And it turned out to be right where the two heads meet at the temple. When I did this I did this one. I said, that's good, Jill. How am I going to connect this? So I did another arc, and that's where it connected. It came right to the hat. So it made that a very important point. And I knew what I had to do, but again, the drawing kind of pushed me to it. I have the frigate here, and I have Oliver Hazard Perry there. They're in line. And what I do with the hands, why are the hands there? I mean, it's more than just letting go, right? The log line. So he's paying homage to the old navigation techniques using a log line, using a sextant, and I changed his hand from this, and I used my own hand. A lot of them I had to use my own hand because I wasn't able to get my models back at the studio, especially at the times I was working. Call Brian, I'm like, Brian, come back. So I used my own hand, using an image of his hand to know that it looked like his hand. So I closed up on the hand because I watched another video of how people use the log line for knots, right? So knots on a line where, so if you have knots on this line and you have a log at the end, like a big chunky stick, and you throw it over water, and they would let the line out and count how many knots would go out with the force of the water. That's how you counted the speed of the ship. So that's what he's doing here. He's letting out that line. And I wanted it to go right through the center. Actually it happened to be working that way. It came right through the center of the two worlds, his past and his present. There's again a navigation thing. So you could say that the water's pulling. He's not pulling, because you're feeding the string.
And it knots 1.2 miles an hour.
There you go. Thank you. I could have named it that.
Exactly.
But I did not. I did not do that.
You said it right.
Okay. So that's kind of the story with that. And you have aesthetic concerns. Like, what do you do with, I wanted another arc. A lot of them, I tend to do arcs at the bottom. It just seemed to be a comfortable way for me to finish the bottom of the pieces. My one model didn't want to pose, right, Veronica? Husband, no, I'm not going to pose. So I was left with myself. I'm in the studio at night. I said, well, I have a story to tell. So what's my story about water? So I told you I started painting when I was 10 years old. And I remember my mother driving me to the Delaware River at the foot of Race Street at one, and I would have been, now here's where the truth comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably 10 years old.
Okay.
Did that work for you?
It works.
Okay, 10, 11, 12. Lewis thinks we kind of crossed paths.
Somebody did.
Okay. So my father worked on the river. When I was a child, we would just drive down there. I mean, the port was an amazing, vibrant place. Those of you who have been around the city long enough remember that. You would be able to walk down or get out of your car and stand at the riverside and look up at these ships, which were mammoth things. And the bollards were at the bottom, bollards, which were the things that they wrapped the ropes around. I said, okay, I've got a story to tell, so let me pose. Okay, started the drawing of myself. Double mirrors, right? If you need a profile artist, you need 2 mirrors. You need to look, you need to be, here's a mirror, here's a mirror, you have to look in this mirror, reflecting this reflection to see your profile. And what's really nice is if you have the drawing, like the drawing's here, the mirror's here, and my mirror is here, I can look at my reflection here and see the reflection of the drawing and line up the shape of my face against that drawing. Do you know what I'm saying? So I can see both my face and you can really, like the sextant, right? Line it up. The hands, it's mostly photographs because it's hard to draw a hand if you're drawing with a hand, if you're drawing. Did I say that right?
Little tongue twister for you.
Yeah, we're translating that. Okay, thank you. So, but still, I'm there looking, and I reversed everything. Remember that if you're looking at one reflection, you're looking at the reverse of what you are. So that's why a double mirror is important. But I always had to reverse all the images, because I have a mole, right? So that mole can't be on this side of my face, right? And if if you have like blemishes or something, I mean, it's hard to see, but your hands are different. So I don't want people to say, Jill, that's the wrong hand over there. I was always like, do I have the thumbs in? Let's see. Okay. So the story goes that I knew I wanted the foot of Race Street. I knew I wanted Race Street Pier. Before Race Street Pier that we have today, that fancy little park. I like the grit. I like the gritty city. It's gorgeous.
I'm with you, Jill.
They had the municipal pier. Anybody remember that? And the police boats. Police had a tugboat. And I would draw the tugboat. So the Ben Franklin Bridge, municipal pier, which kind of would extend out this way, the cobblestone street, and what's this?
Yeah.
Thank you. You know. The only thing that's missing, all the artists would go to that area because it was so beautiful, because you'd see the river, you'd be under the Frankfurt L, which is now in concrete, because I-95 is up there. But it was just the rails and the iron of the Frankfurt L, like you could see up more north, and you hear, the trains going across. So that was an artistic place, everybody. And they had lights. Every intersection, they had lights that would drop down, and they were beautiful antique globe lights. And I know that there's some out there. Somebody probably, when they changed them, somebody, like my father, because he was always at those situations where they're taking things, and so I'll take this, I'll keep it. Somebody's got one in the garage. You got one? I'd love to see that. I didn't put it in, but that was my recollection. That whole, but it didn't make sense. It didn't have a river or water connection. So I let that go. But in this drawing, I used gray for the past and red for the future or the current. So I split this, and of course the ship, I had that split here, but I already had the face in gray tones going away and in red tones coming this way. And it was, again, it was just happening that way. And as soon as it was there, I said, I can't take it away. It needs to be there. It was a preliminary thing to get the drawing. I was going to replace it with the Sanguine. I said, no, leave it. And I kind of kept this more in gray. Eventually I put red into it. For some reason it wasn't working with just black and gray. And I put the shadow of myself at the easel, remembering when I was young. So coming back to the name of the show, from one source, water, memories, and revelations. And if you read my statement, you'll see that every single person I spoke to, I would bring up water. I would ask the questions about water. But then every single person would start to talk about people. People in their lives, people who influenced them, people who they influenced. When I came to Pat with the students and her family. When I talked to Brian, he didn't talk about the ocean. He said it was a dark wall. He talked about the people who influenced him, the very, I should say, the strong people who guided him through his naval career. He talked about Oliver Perry Hazard and his connection to his, town, his city, whatever. In the case of this figure, which was another interesting situation. She said, I grew up on this river, it's the Milwaukee River, and it takes a right angle bend. If you look online, if you look at a map, you can actually see that point. Pretty amazing. It's like a right angle, 90-degree bend. And I really had nothing solid to work on, but when I started to read about the land, the area there, and the people, and this came from the person who sat for me. She said, the story goes that there was an Indian village here, the Sauk Indians, S-A-U-K. I never heard about the tribe. You know? So many tribes. You know, it's kind of, so there's a lot of subsets to the bigger tribe. And so I started to research Sauk Indians. They have the most amazing website. You can read about their culture, you can read about who the people were and where they were and how they moved and how they're connected to the larger tribes. They were known as the yellow people because the land has yellow ochre there. They probably used it. They may have painted, you know, objects themselves, who knows what. They were the people who lived in bark covered huts, the sweat lodges. They made canoes. I implied a canoe shape. I implied the birchwood trees. All of the bending, remember I said every part of my painting has to make sense? Or has to be significant in some way? So the bending of those saplings, how they created those huts. So I started on that circular pattern, which is the sweat lodges implied up here with a shadow and light. And I got everything to a point, and I had the sitter sit for me again for the hands because I was really kind of stuck. I did this in the studio, and I structured it kind of architecturally because the person said we lived in an apartment right by the water. So I envisioned this building that came down and moved out, and then there's the river. So that started me in the studio. I said, bang, that's it. It's a structure. I didn't know what to do with the hands at that time, except that the shape of the canoe was coming out. When I did the research online, again, I went back and read the website. There's a mythological female figure who descended from the clouds. Two men were sitting and eating a deer they had slaughtered and cooked. And I said, bingo, clouds. I had nothing